Hello, people of grace. This week in our community's Advent celebration, we focus on joy, especially the shepherd's joy in the great announcement of Christ's Advent. So I want to talk about some signs of true inner joy. Nehemiah told the people the joy of the Lord was their strength. And joy, true joy, intrinsic joy, grace-based joy, is a great sign of alignment with God and His promises, and a recognition that He really is the deeper reality, that He is present, that He doesn't go away. And David really expressed this in Psalm 16. So much so that in verse 10 of Psalm 16, he said, "You will not let your Holy One see decay." And Peter reminds us that at that moment, David really was lifted up out of himself, because David's body did experience decay, but Christ was resurrected 3 days after his death and did not experience decay. So Psalm 16 is a time where David, without intellectually even necessarily realizing it, was brought into deep alignment with Christ and the Spirit of Christ 1,000 years before Jesus walked on this earth. And now that Jesus has come and we have that concrete incarnational object of faith, we can actually have a better understanding of signs of being in alignment with Christ. And David shows us some of those, even though he was 1,000 years before Jesus. He says in verse 7 that the Lord is the source of his counsel, but that the way that plays out is that in the night, his own heart, David's own heart, instructs him. This idea of instruction even means to correct, but the flavor of it in this passage is like Paul saying to Timothy in 2 Timothy 2, verse 25, that a servant of the Lord really instructs gently. So when it comes from deep within our own heart, it's gentle. And when that inner correction is harsh or severe, that's really the devil's work. He's the accuser. But there's something deep in our heart when we are in alignment with Christ that does challenge us from within to take the highway, to take the noble path. So when my heart challenges me in a very gentle but persistent way in the night hours to take the noble path, to choose the highway, then I have a destination of joy and I'm coming into alignment with Christ. Number two, when my heart does that, the core of my being, then it is glad because it is in alignment with its created purpose. And when my heart is glad, David says, my whole being rejoices. But more literally, it says, my glory rejoices. And that's worth thinking about for a moment. To the Hebrew people, glory was weighty. It was substantive. It was real. And so what David is saying there is that at the foundation of his innermost being, that which was most value about him rejoiced, had joy, when his own heart was in alignment with the Spirit of God and was counseling him to take the noble path. The thing that's most real about you is not your sin nature, though that's real and you can't beat it. But in Christ, by grace, through faith, we have an opportunity to rise above it. And even ultimately, by the work of the Spirit, he begins the work, he finishes it, be delivered from the curse of sin. And so when we come into alignment with Christ, then we should feel some measure of wholeness and joy. So sign number one, my heart chooses the highway and gently challenges me to do the same. Number two, that causes the foundation of who I am, the most valuable part of me, that which bears the image of God, to rejoice. And when those two things are happening, a third sign or hallmark of joy is that my destiny feels assured. I have assurance. David closes Psalm 16 with saying, "You make known to me the paths of life. In your presence there is fullness of joy, and at your right hand is pleasure forever. Those are hallmarks of joy, and we're celebrating the joy of the Advent this week. So let your heart rest in those hallmarks of joy. Choose the noble path. Rejoice when you feel yourself doing that, and walk in assurance. It is Advent, and Advent assures